Space nerds, I was wrong about the loading screen in Star Citizen Alpha 4.6 and 4.5, I think it was. We can actually go back real quick. Yeah, here it is. So here's my previous theory. State of global chat, the talk from developers, the teasers, the engine updates, and the letter from the chairman. It's the loading screens that make me think this might actually be happening soon. Generally, CIG is using the loading screen prompts to advertise upcoming narrative content, features, and ships. Starting in December, we saw talk of comms systems being updated in the Star Citizen universe. We first theorized it could be something data running related, but that's less likely. Not anymore. The next update in January doubled down on the teaser, now explaining that the system is coming online and being shared across thousands in the universe. This gives a sense of urgency, of current state, of this is very present. Much like with the regen crisis being advertised in the update before it showed up, this could be the lore explanation for a more substantial and robust comm system coming online. From the Nyx terraforming to the regen technology being developed in recent years, CIG is using these lore tie-ins for feature implementations and retcons regularly, and they're using the loading screens to do it. Okay. That's enough of that. So I guessed that the loading screens from 4.5 and 4.6 were talking about comms because it was weird, right? The idea that data running was coming in was sort of strange. Now, this is the 4.7 loading screen, and you can see here that it's kind of veered off that possible path. They say, seemingly having learned nothing from the botched introduction of regen tech, Imperator Addison and her overeager administration had only just finished implementing a full overhaul of the comm network, utilizing an untested new technology to allow for instantaneous intersystem transmission, when the news broke that the recently unveiled network had experienced a massive data breach, resulting in the loss of millions of credits. Not super explanatory at first, but then they go on to say, while we await the full details of the hack and the results of the advocacy's so-called investigation, the People's Alliance strongly advises that any sensitive data still be physically transported to ensure its protection. Jesus, that line is thick. Can we, whoop, just whoop, come on, whoop. Need some kind of freaking pressure sensitivity. Yoop. There we go. Okay, so they want you to physically transport the data. This is key. We'll get to that in a second. This whole sordid episode serves as yet another reminder that while progress is necessary and inevitable, it must be tempered by measured reason. This might also be a subliminal message to the Star Citizen backers. But clearly this is no longer about the comms system. I talked about this with 10#42 on the podcast over the weekend, and we both were kind of thinking they feel like it feels like they messaged something in their earlier loading screens, and then when we all went completely the wrong direction with it, maybe now they're making it more obvious. Maybe this was always the plan. I don't know. But this is making it very clear that they're talking about physically transporting things, aka data. But this is important because data running in Star Citizen is physical. Now, yes, data running is in the game. It is in the 1.0 presentation. You can see it right here. It is a listed contract type, along with vehicle transport, passenger transport, and like the other ones that we're already doing, which is mainly cargo related. There's not really a ton of official information about how data running would work. I will show you kind of the one thing that we have been supposedly told about it here. But if you look back at any records talking about the gameplay and what it's supposed to be in the game, you can read on the wiki here. Data transport is an upcoming career in Star Citizen that will evolve around collecting and transporting data and trading it. Data will only be able to be transported by designated data running ships that are able to store it. Data will either be collected through exploration by recording unknown, uncharted parts of space, or by downloading it from another server, and can be traded afterwards. Now, the current two data running ships that they have on here are the Mercury Star Runner and the Herald. They were both delivered with literal physical objects in the ship that are supposedly used for storing said data. They also have, I think they both have like a dish that you can find that is meant to retrieve said data. All of this does make sense, and it's not a crazy thing. In fact, I'm playing through Star Wars Outlaws right now, and one of my favorite things to do is go and find these little data chips that you can turn into different factions to get better reputation for them. super simplified idea of how data could work compared to what we're about to talk about. But it's just goes to show that like this is not a crazy thing in a sci-fi game. Space games do this kind of stuff all the time. Commoditizing data can be as simple as a little point, like a single point in a database, versus actual information that you've scanned from somewhere. In Star Wars Outlaws, yeah, this is just like a little icon that you're basically turning into places. But in Star Citizen, data is supposed to be where's the resources where's the the Karenite, right? In what caves can you find Karenite? Where is the derelict Idris with the valuables on board? How do you get to the artifact that this certain faction wants you to turn in? That brings us to the first time they ever showed us a realistic idea of data as a commodity. And this idea of data as a commodity is central to this idea of data running. Here's a kind of full look at what they were talking about. This is 2023, I believe. Yeah, CitizenCon.
So our current objective, it's much more interesting if we can actually take this on the go. So let's download it to our data bank. As you'll notice, we now have the representation of the environment in the upper left corner of our visor. Now, the thing that's really interesting to note at this point is not all environments will have such a convenient kiosk available. You may encounter rundown settlements, or you might come across a cave that no one else has ever set foot on before. What will happen in this instance is your radar will incrementally update your map, and it will incrementally reveal your environment and just save that to your data bank. So you kind of reveal it incrementally. So this map, what we see in the upper left corner of our visor, is not really just a map. What it really is actually data. It's our radar. And we can see contacts on our radar as we scan. And it's basically what we have available in stored in our data bank. So,
okay, so he got the point across there, right? And you get the idea. He's basically calling out the fact that as scanning becomes more a part of the gameplay, you will scan something, record that data, that will be saved to your map, but other people who haven't gotten that data or been in that area won't have that map. Right now, you can go on the star map in Star Citizen, and there's freaking locations all over the place, right? You just non-stop quantum beacons and markers and all this stuff. I can't find any pictures of the actual map, of course. It's all the Arc Star map. Let's take this. This looks like it might be an older picture, but whatever. Works as an example. All of these locations are public locations. Space stations, planets, jump points, all that nonsense. When you zoom in on each of these planets, you see all the outposts and stuff. You see mining facilities, you see bunkers, security outposts, distribution centers. Those aren't all going to be on our map all the time. And that's what he's trying to say here. Not only that, caves themselves won't be on the map. You have to scan them down and find them. That means that the data then has some usability that can be shared. Now, they also in this presentation showed us the first version of sharing said data. Check this out.
Looks interesting. Press T. So what we can do is set a marker, and we can customize the details of that marker. Now, what you'll notice as well is as we set markers, there's metadata that is encoded into each of these markers on top of the customized name that we can specify. So we can mark as many markers as we want in this map. And these are all saved to our data bank. And we can eventually share these markers and even sell these markers on the market. So the thing about this, we can't really talk about markers without mentioning data running.
So it's been laid out. We know where data running is going. We know they're at least trying to show some signs of I mean, it's hard to say, man. You know, you want to say that loading screens are trying to tell you what's coming up. They kind of have been telling us what's coming up. Like, they do play out. But there's a reason all of us were like, man, this is probably talking about comm systems. It doesn't seem like data running is really in a, like, the game doesn't seem like it's ready for data running. We don't even have FPS scanning. We haven't gotten these custom markers on the star map. The star map is awful as it is right now. I think some quality of life needs to be thrown on that first. But there's also not quite enough things to find either, which does lead us to the next part of this video, which is about starchitect and all these things coming in. We'll get to that in a second. But all of this makes sense to describe what data running is and where it might be going and what it might be used for. It helps to add context to exploration, especially now that we can see how resources are getting more valuable with crafting coming in. But this is CIG we're talking about, you know? What are the chances they're just going to drop data running into the game in any form without us knowing about it first from a leak or a monthly report or something? I don't think even if we did see data running coming in, it would be similar to what we hope it would be with the ships running missions and having specific things you have to use. I think data running would start out here with little markers. Except, no. Because the way that they're setting this up sounds a lot like in Star Wars Outlaws. You basically have to get a data pad of some sort and just move it somewhere. There's a very good chance that this first version of data running that they're talking about will literally just be data pads with data on them. Essentially just like a courier mission, a one-handed object that you're transporting. I'm thinking if data running is coming this year, it is not going to be because data is a commodity, and it's not going to be because we're getting the data running that we like. It's more so just to add another loop in. That being said, adding another loop in is not crazy. I think it was the February monthly report, maybe, that talked about a new gameplay loop. Perspective goals for the upcoming years. There we go. Players will meet in some of the new game loops. So there's some stuff. There's some weird stuff that's going on, but I really don't think that if data running comes in, it's going to be anything more than like a tier 0 adaptation of some kind of gameplay for it. We did talk about there being locations and other things that need to be happening. That's the other part of this report. Over here, Nyx 1 land grab continues unabated. This is the storyline that we've been able to very easily follow since October and kind of call out, I think, all the way back to the announcement of Nyx and the fact that Nyx was going to be different. I had Paul on for a podcast, the Astro Historian, and we were theorizing that because they were trying to switch the planet to be this paradise that could be settled, they would have to build a story around the fact that everybody's going to want to come back in to settle it if Nyx was left alone because the planets weren't worth it. Lo and behold, the next month, the loading screen showed that, yes, the UEE is talking about this, you know, oh, there's terraforming going on. What might we be able to do there? And then we have the Clean the Air event, which a lot of people are thinking might have been started by the UEE to continue to hurt the people of Nyx and keep them kind of on their back foot while this planet is becoming viable for living. Now, on this loading screen here in March going into April 4.7, we're getting kind of close to Invictus Week, which would be a big time for military campaigns. They say, following the experimental terraformation of the planet, interested parties continue to stake their claims, with numerous outposts being established across its recently renewed surface. The development boom plaguing Nyx 1 shows no signs of slowing. Most concerning are reports of a new group who seem to be establishing fortified settlements at an alarming rate. That's probably a new faction coming in. While it is not clear yet who these newcomers to Nyx are or what their intentions might be, what is rapidly becoming apparent is that if the People's Alliance do not start to take the task of settling on Nyx 1 seriously, there is a high chance that there will be only scraps left on the table when the governing committee does decide to act. They are setting up a pretty baller A story this year, dude. I think this is going to end up being a full-on, unfortunately for those who don't like combat, this is going to be a full-on faction warfare kind of situation on Nix 1, I think. I think there will be a lot of peaceful places to go in Nix 1, but this is definitely leaning towards lots of outposts, lots of factions, lots of contracts for you to take part in and pick a side. Can they pull that off? Honestly, I don't know. Like, they tried to say that this was going to happen in Pyro, and Pyro fell completely flat and continues to. So there's no guarantee this actually does bring us some kind of a cool faction-focused war across Nix 1, but it does seem like that's what they're trying to set up. How would this be possible? Would be the system starchitect that they're working on, which, if we go back to the show with Benoit earlier this year, we can confirm from his own words. Here we go. All right, check this out. So, what this is all dependent on is Nix 1, right? This is the Planet Tech V5. For those who do not remember Planet Tech V5, I will give you a quick show of what they were showing of it. This would be, 2024. I'll show you the stuff from 2025 because that is much easier to remember at this point. This was Planet Tech V5.
Swamps. These core biome concepts give us a fantastic platform to hone our technology. In some cases, because the current tech couldn't do them at all, or because we want to completely step up our game for them. So, let's approach this planet in much the same way that you, the player, will, from orbit. The orbit appearance of the planets going forward is far more tied to what is present on the surface. Previously, we had different data that drove the orbital and ground coloring. That's because the orbit was designed to look like vegetation that we'd place on the surface, and the ground coloring was trying to be a mix of soil, rock, and the organic compound coloring that forms the kind of colors there. Now we author much more of the data in a unified way. When you look at Earth, you see blues and greens for ocean and vegetation, and brown or yellowy tones for sand and soil. We wanted to keep it as simple as that. The same set of textures and data that define the color of the soil, sand, and rock on the ground are used to create the orbital look. We then assess the presence of vegetation and competition between different species on each part of the planet.
That's crazy. That's insane. So this whole system is based around making sure that planets are built using a set of rules rather than artist input. The artists still have input, but the rules define where things spawn. So like rocks spawn at the bottom of mountains, grass spawns in valleys, snow happens at the top of hills. At the bottom of those hills, you'll find rivers and lakes from the snowmelt. It brings Star Citizen planets into a more logical state of being, and it's based around some machine learning from Luna, Earth, and Mars. So that is Planet Tech V5, and that's mostly what we know about it. But what Benoit confirms here is that Planet Tech V5 will include starchitect.
Tell me something we should be excited about that we're not currently excited about. Give us something nobody's expecting.
That's hard. You're putting me on the spot now.
I'm putting you on the spot, mister. The batteries are coming.
Okay. Well, one thing we didn't talk about in detail that I could give background info on is Genesis.
Okay.
And Nix 1, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, we're obviously working on this. That's no surprise to anyone. But the one thing that I'm excited about is that we've kind of conjoined development on 3 separate things in order to ship the best Nix experience that we could offer, right? And so, obviously, Genesis is part of that, and the Planet Tech that's behind it. But also, the starchitect work. And so, for those who don't know, starchitect is a way for us to be smarter about building planets and the human populations that are on them. So settlements, buildings, distro centers, LZs, name it, right? So historically, we've placed that by hand. And so starchitect is a way for us to give designers control over the planetary scale of how these are distributed. And it's that's a fairly fundamental change to how the game is made.
Yeah, it's actually one of the craziest changes, I think. It's still one that I'm waiting to see proved. Let me just give you like a little teaser of their plans for this. I'm not going to play this whole presentation, but I'm going to jump around a little bit so you get some of the most important details here. Listen to this.
And any location that you'll find needs to have its own unique personality and no repetition. We don't want you to find the same location twice.
You know, that's not going to happen.
This also means that this is your exploration and your findings. So when you go out there and explore with your Carrack or with your Corsair, is that whatever you find, you can share with your orgs or with your friends. As for that density, if you fly down to the planet, we want you to find something, let's say, every 100 clicks. But also improve the mission experience. So when you stay more on the planet, you're more immersed and you go from location to location. Just keep going.
They want you to spend most of your, or not most of your time. They really want people to spend a lot of time in one place. I think this handles a couple different issues that they have. First is people don't like quantum travel, right? Quantum travel exists because the game needs scale or else it doesn't feel consequential to actually go anywhere. At the same time, you need both gameplay to do in quantum travel and also enough gameplay in one place that you don't have to quantum travel constantly to do every single outpost. So they want people to stay on the same planet or at least in the same planetary system to do all of their contracts and stuff. I think this is a big part of that. But it also helps with... actually, I'll let him tell that.
Bunkers and distribution centers. The richer the data, the richer these locations will be. Secondly, they all have a function. We've got mining for our mining outposts, farming for the farmsteads, or just places where people live. The function of the place will define the way the place looks as well, and its form. And last but not least, the people as well, the faction and their loadouts. We've got lawful people, like the new Citizens for Prosperity in Pyro, unlawful, such as Xenofred, and sometimes not even no one. And the place needs to look a bit, derelict. In different places, you'll find different people.
Yeah, so that's the other side of things. Like the factions that we all know don't really exist that well. The ground outposts in the game right now are pretty bad. Partially because, Jesus, that's hot tea, dude. Look at this. Can you guys see that steam? No, you really can't. The ground outposts aren't great. They're not super intuitive. They don't have their own meanings and reason for being. They don't really tell a story. So this whole thing is going to have to rework how their ground stuff is working. And I don't know. I'm excited for this system. I think it's going to be really cool, but I really got to see this in actual practice.
We want to make sure it really feels like people have built their lives here. So let's talk about...
Okay, here is the crazy part. This is kind of the nuts part of starchitect.
Distribution centers. So to hit that bit of our benchmark, we make sure that locations are near each other and group them together. The effect it gives is a fully developed landscape with vistas and points of interest all over. And we group them together in what we like to call a cluster, like this one, that has 13 locations. Let's talk about clusters. Clustering means generating locations near other locations. So, for example, if you find a distribution center, just like in the verse currently, I would find forward operating bases next to them. But if you go even further out, you'd find mining outposts to funnel those resources to the FOBs. Go out even further, you'd find caves around them, because that's where they might find some of the gems. And then we can even specify the data on a cluster level. All of the factions that live at this whole cluster, any mining outpost, that would be the same people, but also what commodities they sell, to find on what resource you'd find. So let's look at an example of the clusters. We have our mining cluster. Again, we can define what rules we should have. Rules, well, near a resource, just like our mining outpost, but also it needs to be on a lawful planet. We can target on a planetary scale where they would need to be. They need protection. As for the targets, well, caves, mining outposts, but even trade posts. Let's go to the other side of the spectrum.
So you guys can see how this is all something that can easily be like,
data.
They can easily set the stage, or rather this really easily explains, where the heck did that thing go? Yeah, this really, what am I even doing on this page? It's my first time, okay? I don't draw much. This really easily explains this whole idea of the big, where is it? The booming development boom, like kind of reeks of, we're setting down a bunch of clusters of outposts and industrial and all that kind of stuff.
We can, on a cluster level, specify, again, what mineral commodities, but also what harvestable types you'd find are in that region. Now let's look at the other side of the spectrum, an unlawful cluster. What rules? Well, they need to be far away from any other cluster, because they want to be isolated and do their evil deeds on their own. And also on an unlawful planet, such as somewhere in the Pyros system. For the targets, outlaw outposts, crash ships, because they would shoot them down, and also ruins from just places they just completely overrun. The data on this one, you'd find specific loadouts, and they'll be using weapons that you wouldn't find in any other legal system. And these weapons will be sold at the shops in these regions. So, now that we have a cluster, let's go even bigger. Just like
this is the part where you say, I'll believe it when I see it.
Clusters near other clusters, and we group them together, ranging between 10 to 15 locations each. And we group this into what we call a sector. Like this one, that has about 120 locations. However, on a planetary scale, we can define how many sectors we should have, with each their own data and persona. And every single one of these locations is now ready for the mission system to hook up and give you gameplay, and for you to find a bunch of places on your own.
Thank you, Astromonkey.
And just on this side of the planet, can you guess the number? We've got about 3,042 locations.
So, like, that's insane. But, again, falls in line with what they're pushing for the Nix 1 drop. Is this going to be a 4.8 kind of thing? I don't know. But they're seeming like the planets are in the star map as a 4.7. They keep teasing it in the loading screens. Benoit's been talking about Planet Tech. Ali Brown's been talking about Planet Tech. It's getting close. I don't know if it's 4.8, 4.9, but I do think it's probably this summer. We'll see if starchitect really impresses, though. That's really, that's the loading screen. I wanted to talk real in depth about that, where this might be showing we could be heading, what sort of things it might be saying about the next couple updates, but mainly just the fact that, no, I don't think this is talking about social tools anymore. It looks more like it's data running, and probably not the full data running we want. Does that mean social tools aren't coming in? Also, no. Because they sound like they also want to get the tactical strike groups into the game for Invictus, which is, good lord. If they do that without any new social tools, we're screwed.